This is a lecture that I offer to my second-year chemistry students every year, and I am doing this by video because of the COVID-19 crisis. And I call this an evolutionary explanation of irreducible complexity, why science and religion must agree. And I have told my students that if you do what I suggest, you have a Nobel Prize waiting for you. My mentor, Linus Pauling, wrote a book called Vitamin C and the Common Cold in 1970. It is still controversial. He stated that megadoses, well over a gram a day of ascorbic acid, vitamin C, could prevent colds and ameliorate the symptoms. He was working on this and published it about the time that I was working with him for a term at Stanford. And he launched, really single-handed, the multi-billion-dollar megavitamin industry, which is still going strong. Now, his interest was in the evolution of the ascorbic acid deficiency. He notes that most mammals make their own ascorbic acid, but humans do not have that ability. And what he did was he postulated that humans had evolved in an environment that had so much citrus that they didn't need to generate their own vitamin C, and therefore over a period of hundreds of thousands of years they lost the ability to synthesize vitamin C. Now, recent research suggests that he was not correct about this, and of course evolutionary theory still has to explain it, and it's probably very complex. Now, let's talk about evolution and biochemical cycles. And I'll give you the example of one that most chemistry students are familiar with from biology, what's called the Krebs or citric acid cycle. You've probably seen this in a textbook. This comes from a W.H. Freeman and Company text called Molecular Cell Biology. And you can see that you have chemicals coming into the system, being transformed, and then producing energy, producing things like NADH, and it generates energy for the mitochondria to give to the rest of the cell. Each step in the cycle involves a different complex enzyme or two, and they are noted at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Those are different enzymes that have to be in the mitochondria working to make the whole process work. Each step in the cycle also produces what, if built up, is a metabolic poison, and you can't let it build up. That's why you have the next step to get rid of it. And ultimately it produces a metabolic poison, we all know, of carbon dioxide and water. Not the water, but the carbon dioxide. So, all the enzymes must be present in order for the mitochondria to work. If they're not, the mitochondria and ultimately the cell will be destroyed in rather short order. Thus, all the enzymes that are in the mitochondria had to evolve at the same time, or something very close to that had to happen. So this biochemical system and many others are what some scientists called irreducibly complex, and they look like they've been designed by a clever bioengineer. Now let's look at the bacteriophage. You'd probably think of this as a virus, T4, and this comes from nature. Bacteriophage T4 uses its contractile tail, which you see here in the diagram from nature, to inject its genome into a bacterial host cell. Central to the process is this base plate at the end of the tail. The base plate tail tube complex, this whole apparatus, comprises 145 polypeptide chains comprised of 15 different proteins, and the structures reveal how the base plate couples the host recognition to the sheath contraction. In other words, the DNA of the bacteriophage is up in here, and it's pushed into the cell that's being attached through the base plate. That looks irreducibly complex. I mean, if one of those chemical structures isn't present, the whole thing won't work. Now, there's two current paths of science with respect to this question. You look at the evidence of irreducible complexity in biochemical systems, and that has provoked two different responses. What's called an intelligent design movement, which is centered in the Discovery Institute here in the United States. They admit, yeah, these things are irreducibly complex, and then they look for examples of irreducibly complex systems, and they look for explanations of them. On the other hand, neo-Darwinian arguments are produced against intelligent design, and they insist, with Darwin, that all biochemical systems must have evolved gradually through natural selection, something you all learned about in biology. Well, Michael Behe, who is at Lehigh University, doctor, back in 1996, so we're looking back 24 years, produced a book called Darwin's Black Box that I read soon after this. And he argued that many biochemical systems look designed by an intelligence, that all the parts must work or the system won't work. He calls the systems irreducibly complex. He says they couldn't evolve gradually by chance because all the biochemical systems and structures have to be present in order to make the process work. He followed up the 1996 with several more developing the same theme, including one that is from 2019 called Darwin Devolves. Now, an uproar ensued. Anti-evolutionists and creationists, who many times just want to think that the book of Genesis is a science book, and that the universe was created in 6 days, 6 calendar days. They were energized by Darwin's black box. Well, this is ironic because Behe does believe in what we call microevolutionary change, that a species can develop in response to its environment over a period of time. But he also says that the irreducibly complex systems imply design by an intelligence. Now, evolutionists looked at this. Evolutionists deny any possibility of intelligent design, and they inferred that what he's getting at is a proof for the existence of God, such as Augustine and St. Thomas Aquinas came up with way long ago. So they even refused to permit design to be taught or discussed in any university that they administer. So this is a big fuss. Now, Darwinians were caught off guard by Behe and other ideas, and some respond then by accusing them of creationism, of going back to the God created the universe in 6 days and there's no evolution at all. Others tried to find Darwinian explanations of these irreducibly complex systems. Researchers worked on looking for evidence of evolutionary change in the systems, and you see whole journals devoted to this. Richard Dawkins, a very famous atheist, came up with a book called The Blind Watchmaker, and he wrote a book and narrated a video. You can see his work on the internet. His thesis is neo-Darwinian, that given enough time and selection pressure, favorable biochemical systems can evolve from primitive biochemical systems. And he says none of them are irreducibly complex. What's the truth behind this? Well, many biochemical systems, like these, this is the animation of the cilia, bacterial cilia. And there's so many parts to this. They don't, it won't work at all without all of the parts working together. They appear to be irreducibly complex. Multiple enzyme systems. We've looked at the Krebs cycle a little while ago. The clotting of blood. Vision. You can click on bombardier beetle on the internet and see how it works to generate sulfuric acid. So my advice is to look for an explanation of irreducible complexity without postulating a designing intelligence. What do I mean by that? Well, there's two options. This is either true or false. Either intelligently, such that looks intelligently designed, irreducibly complex systems, either they're designed by some kind of guiding hand, some kind of engineer, or irreducibly complex systems arise without any intelligent guiding hand. Logically, those are the only two possibilities here. So, let's look at option one. These irreducibly complex systems are designed by some kind of guiding hand. Suppose this means a God hypothesis. Suppose there is God who did this. Well, in Western thought, which in fact made Western science possible, we are all beneficiaries of this. God made humans in God's image and likeness with intellect and free will. The world is logical, and our science can discover what's behind certain phenomena. Therefore, if we have intellect and free will, God would respect that free will. And what that means is that if he were to set up biochemical systems that irrevocably point to an intelligent design, that would make it impossible to deny divine intervention. That would destroy any ability to disagree and interfere with human free will. Therefore, there must be an alternate explanation available to science empirically. So, option two is that the systems arise without any intelligent guiding hand. Then it's in the purview of science to discover, by hypothesis, experiment, analysis, and revision, what it is that pushes the triumph of efficient biosystems that we see all over the world, all over these creatures, plant and animal, and even down to the bacteria and virus. In other words, for those of you who studied thermodynamics, you have to find the negative delta G in the overall system. Something like a series of events has to happen that overall the combination of entropy and enthalpy in the overall chemical system has to work by having a negative Gibbs free energy. I encourage you to do this. If you do, if you come up with the paper or papers that show how this is done, that the overall evolutionary system has a negative delta G, I guarantee you'll win a Nobel Prize in the next 100 years.